All right, so we begin with a recap of what we've talked about last week. And then we continue with the Rambam Shemona Perokim, his 8-chapter introduction to Pirkay Avot. So last week we read how the Rambam is of the view that the golden mean, the middle way in between any two extremes in any given character, that's the one to achieve. And only in such cases where one feels like he is falling to one extreme or the other does one need to push themselves in behavior to the other extreme so as to bring them back to the middle. So if one was too giving to the point that it was causing abuse, then one should behave on the other side and be a little more withholding until they've come to the middle where there's a balance between giving and withholding. The same thing true between recklessness and being cowardice and being overindulgent versus being prudent. A person should always find the middle way. And when a person feels that they are, or when discussing with what he calls a Reif Nefesh, a doctor of the soul, speaking with scholars who know how to help them, guide them through their moral character building, and they come to the conclusion that there's indeed need of healing and that they are on one side of the center or the other, then the remedy shall be to behave on the other extreme, and that way bring them back to the center. Now, the Rambam makes a commentary on this idea and the mistakes that people make in watching others behave in one way or another. Now, remember like this. And on this account, in this vein, there were some of the pious ones who wouldn't be exactly on the middle, but they would be a little bit off to the middle, off from the center. They would put themselves either to a little more than the middle or a little less than the middle to safeguard them from falling to the opposite direction. Example. They would stay away from proper self-regulation. And they would behave a little bit as if they were undesiring of pleasure. So the middle ground is to be enjoying what one's supposed to, but not overindulgent. And they would behave a little bit less than what's necessary in terms of engaging in pleasure, so that they would stay away from being overindulgent. And likewise, from the in-between line, in between cowardice and recklessness, is what the Rambam calls gvura, inner strength. So they would veer off the exact center of inner strength, to the side a little bit more, pushing themselves to take a little more risk than the middle, so that they don't fall into cowardice. And likewise, they would push themselves from being good-hearted, to be a little overly good, a little bit, so that they don't fall into being hard of heart and not helping anyone. And they would go from humility, which is halfway between being self-despising and arrogant, and they would, instead of being just down the middle, they would be a little a little bit towards the side of self-effacement, so that they don't end up in ego. Likewise, all the others, they would look at the one that's more dangerous, if you will, and they would go a little bit off to the other direction. So whichever the two extremes is more dangerous, they would be a little bit off center. Instead of being exactly down the middle, exactly halfway between cowardice and recklessness, they would be a little bit to the side of reckless. Not that it would be reckless, but a little bit toward that side, and that they would take more risk than necessary. And likewise, they would refrain a little bit from pleasures more than necessary to stay away from overindulgence. And the last example he gave was here, being a little bit more giving rather than being down the middle, so that they don't fall into completely withholding and not being giving, generous people. And of this is what they said, to go beyond the letter of the law. There were some pious people, sometimes in some places, and they would go to the absolute extremes, like fasting. This is not just refraining from extra indulgence, this is actually going to the other extreme of completely ignoring one's need to enjoy food, fasting. Likewise, kumbalelas, staying up late at night, or just staying up nights, period. And refraining from eating meat or eating wine or drinking wine, and completely swearing off women, celibacy, as opposed to confined to marriage and within the rules of a Jewish halachic marriage. They would completely swear off women, celibate, and wear heavy woolen clothing and clothing with hair, so it's uncomfortable. And dwelling in the hilltops, and being isolated in the deserts. So when we read about these kinds of people in the Talmud, or even in scripture, or in other Jewish literature of such saints who would do such things, says the Rambam, don't make the mistake of thinking that this is the proper path of how you're supposed to behave. Like they did not do any of this. It says here El, but it should say Ella. They've only done this as a way of healing, as we explained. In other words, these scholars, is what the Rambam is saying, these pious ones, felt that they were too overindulgent, so they went to the extreme of fasting. And they went to the extreme of asceticism. In other words, let's put it this way. The notion of ascetic living, of living a life of refrain, stems from the notion that exists within many religions that the body is essentially a bad thing. And therefore, the challenge in life is to avoid it as much as possible. And for the Rambam, and for Judaism in general, that's absolutely false. The body is not bad at all. The body is actually the medium through which you serve God. Certainly in the Rambam, that's the case. And therefore, afflicting pain upon the body for itself, for its own purpose, is out of the question in Rambam's view. The only time pious ones that have done that is because there is a need for that. Because they felt they were overindulgent, therefore they had to go to the other extreme of asceticism. They felt that they were too easily influenced by their surroundings, so they would isolate themselves in the wilderness. But not because it's virtuous in and of itself, but rather because it leads them to get to the middle ground that the Rambam so cherishes. Now, in this area, in the Rambam's pushback against asceticism, which we'll read more about soon, in Chassidus, it goes even a step further. But first, the similarities. The Rambam is dealing with people, first of all, the Essenes, who he lived amongst, or the Karaites, I'm sorry, who believed that the path to knowing Torah is through a life of asceticism, lots of fasting and self-affliction. The Rambam is pushing back against that notion. And one might also say that this is in contrast to some of the medieval Ashkenazi scholars who did tout the idea of some asceticism and afflicting pain upon one's body. So the Rambam is pushing back against what he sees existing in his lifetime as this mistaken path to service of Hashem in this ascetic view. And Chassidus did a similar thing. The Baal Shem Tov in Ashkenaz, some centuries after the Rambam, pushed back against a hard culture of elite scholars who did believe that asceticism and separation from the world around us was and is the way to the service of Hashem. And the Baal Shem Tov pushed back against that. There's a famous teaching of Baal Shem Tov. The verse reads, Kisira chamor soinacha revet tachas masoi. You see the donkey of one you hate, and it's being carried, it's carrying a heavy load. And the verse goes on to say, don't ignore it and go help the donkey, even though you may not like the person who owns the donkey. That's the simple reading of the verse. But the Baal Shem Tov read like this. Kisira chamor, when you see a donkey, the word chamor, which means donkey, could also mean materialism. You see materialism and you think, sainacha, you think it's your enemy. You think you hate him. Says the verse, you made a mistake. Help it. Help the materialism to become the vehicle for the service of Hashem. So in this way, Chassidism and the Rambam push back, each in their respective eras, push back against what they saw as the incorrect view of Judaism, which valued asceticism. But it's a bit different the way, philosophically at least, the way Chassidus views this and the way the Rambam views this. As we're going to see, and as we've noted before in previous classes, for the Rambam, the stack of life looks something like this. A healthy body, on top of that's a healthy character. And on top of that is a healthy mind that can explore the divine. So helping the body and helping my character and building good moral character for the Rambam is a means for which I'm going to prepare myself so that my mind is open and free to serve, to explore the divine on this intellectual journey. Whereas in Chassidus, it's kind of the reverse, as we've talked about before, where a person engages in intellectual pursuit of knowledge of Hashem so that he can bring it into his own emotions, and then, Chassidus even adds, bring it into the body. So it's not just a question of, let's say for the Rambam, have a healthy body so that you can properly use your mind to explore the divine. For Chassidus, it's actually the mind, it's the body itself should become sanctified. See godliness within the physicality, not just make sure your physicality is okay, you're healthy, and your character is in order so that you can explore intellectual ideas of the divine, but actually to engage the body for its own purpose and elevate it, that it become holy. The whole doctrine of Dira B'Tachtonim, of making a dwelling place for God in the lowly realms, within the body, within the physicality. And this is going to become even more clear when we go on to discuss later. The Rambam's talking about mitzvahs, all the commandments. He frames them all as God's way of helping us achieve the middle way, as he's going to explain shortly. Whereas Chassidus, the mitzvahs are not just to help me get a middle way so that I can properly explore the divine using my mind, but actually the mitzvahs themselves are theirs to engage my body and sanctify it. So where Chassidus and Rambam both are pushing back against the life of asceticism, and they both agree that the body is to be taken care of and it's not the enemy, and the body is not bad, Chassidus goes a step further. Rambam just says, make sure the body is healthy so you can serve God with your mind, and Chassidus says, make the body sacred. And that the objective of the mitzvahs are to do just that, to make the body and the physical world sacred. But having said that, let's get back to the Rambam here, who writes that anyone within Jewish thought, Talmud or Jewish literature, who did live a life of asceticism, don't think that this is actually a path in the service of Hashem for everybody. They did so out of the need for healing, as we described before, that they felt that they were on one extreme, they felt maybe they were too indulgent, they would go to the other extreme of being of fasting and asceticism. Or they felt, let's say, that they were too prone to anger, and therefore they would refrain, and they would take all kinds of shame and abuse just to inculcate within themselves the character of the middle ground, which comes at, if someone's at one extreme and one pulls to the other extreme, one finds themselves in the middle, as we described in last week's class. Another reason why one might leave society and live a life of seclusion in the desert or the hilltops, as he says, is lehevshid ante medina. If a person sees that the society is living is degenerate and it's causing him to behave negatively, to the point that he's afraid that he's going to lose his moral character by influence of the society around him. And therefore they ran off to the deserts where there's no bad people. So either one of two reasons they were running away from society, either because it was for self-healing, because they felt like they had to refine their own character and they had to go to the other extreme to get to the middle, or because society had bad influence on them and they were afraid that the negative impact of society would rub off on them and therefore they would leave the city. The Rambam actually mentions this in his book of laws as well, in the laws called Hilchot Deot, the laws of character, if you will. Like Yirmiyah writes in the book of Jeremiah, who's going to give me a place to stay in the desert to host me? I'll leave my people, and I will abandon them, because they're all licentious people, who lack any substance, lack any faith, and therefore I'm checking out, I'm leaving. Now here comes the big error in observing this and not understanding the reasons for why these individuals chose to live an ascetic lifestyle. And when these foolish people saw that these pious ones did these actions of extreme asceticism, they didn't understand their intention of getting away from negative society, from negative influence, or their intention to straighten out their character because they felt they were too much to the other side. So they thought that this behavior is good. And they, worked at trying to attain these characters. To think, I want to be like that pious person. And they inflicted pain upon their bodies, all kinds of pain and all kinds of affliction. And they thought that they've acquired good character and that they've done themselves a favor. And they thought they're getting closer to God that way. As if predicated on the notion that God hates the body and wants it to be rot away. And as we demonstrated earlier, that's not the case. And they didn't understand that these extremes are negative. And through these negative behaviors, you're going to acquire negative character traits. This can be compared to someone who has no idea about medicine. And he sees a professional doctor. That he sees someone who's about to die, and he sees a doctor feed this patient who's lying there. I'm not sure I pronounced that, but a guy walks into a doctor's office, and he sees someone who's sick and dying, and the doctor feeds him some medicine in Arabic called shacham al-khantal. I guess it's some very heavily toxic chemical. Vaskmunia and some other chemical, some other medicine. Vatsever and some other one. Here it says balaz, alloy. Maybe some kind of alloy. Something like that. So he sees him giving him medicine basically. And the doctor says, okay, don't feed this patient any food. And then these patients got healed. They've been completely saved from the brink of death. The foolish person watching this, because he sees that these medicines heal the sick, then certainly it's going to help the healthy one remain on his health. Maybe make him stronger. And this man decides to start taking medicines every day. To behave as if he was a sick person. And this person will no doubt get sick. In other words, you walk in, take it to even more extreme. You walk into a live surgery and you see someone cut up, with a gory scene essentially. And then you watch the whole thing happen and you see the person walks out healthy. And then the fool is going to say, well, if that made this person healthy, let me try it too. Person is taking antibiotics because he's sick, and someone else watching this says, wow, look at the antibiotics making him healthy. But a healthy person taking those antibiotics is detrimental. And it says that Rambam, the same thing is true of someone who is sick in his character. And because he's sick in his character, has to go to some extreme. And only somebody who's suffering from an extreme character should go to the other extreme. But someone who is just of a healthy nature, he's well balanced between recklessness and cowardice. He's right down the middle. For him to go to one of the extremes is actually just to make himself sick for no reason. Even though for somebody else who's way too reckless, let's say, and this person, because he's too reckless, is now healing himself by going to the other extreme of prudence and, veering on the side of cowardice, that doesn't mean that everybody else who's healthy should behave that way. Just like someone who is sick and takes antibiotics doesn't mean that everybody else should be taking antibiotics. Which is an interesting commentary in general. Just because something is good for somebody else doesn't mean it's good for you. It's a general rule. I should add one thing at this point. There is in Tanya one place where the Alter Rebbe talks about this idea of demonstrating to myself that my godly soul is of more value than my animal soul. My godly instinct, my desire to serve Hashem is more important than my desire to serve myself. And to that end, says the Alter Rebbe, that one should do what's known in Chassidism as iskafia. Iskafia means self-control. Do you want to eat? You have to eat, right? Okay, wait 5 minutes. Why waiting 5 minutes? You're going to eat anyway in 5 minutes. Wait 5 minutes just to prove the point that you're in control of your animal instincts, not the reverse. So I don't know that it's necessarily contradictory to anything that Rambam is talking about here, because the Alter Rebbe is not at all advising asceticism. Quite the contrary. In Igeres HaTeshuvah, in part 3 of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe has an epistle on Teshuvah. There he talks heavily against over fasting and says that today, if someone feels like he needs to do penitence through fasting, better give charity. Even though he does say that a person should do some of the fast and he should do it half days. But since then, the Rebbe has written that for nowadays fasting for teshuvah is not the right way to go. Better give charity and do introspection. But nonetheless, the idea of self-control for self-control's sake does exist within Chassidus. Now, I would think that that would fall into the category of what the Rambam began with today, where he said that there were some people that there were pious ones who would go a little bit off the center to put a guardrail so that they don't go to the negative extreme. Like, so use the example, someone, they would be a little bit more taking risk, more than the middle exactly, so that they don't fall into cowardice. Or they would be a little bit more giving, so that they don't fall into being too withholding. They'd be a little bit more giving than just the center. And one of the examples he gave was that they would be instead of being just straight down the line prudent, halfway between overindulgence and completely denying oneself, they would be a little bit towards the denial of oneself. Let's say, put 0 is complete denial, 100 is overindulgence. They would be at 45 instead of 50, right? So that they don't end up in the overindulgence, because the overindulgence, I guess in this case, is the worst of the two. That might be similar to that which they're out there suggesting: control yourself just for the sake of control yourself. Push off the meal by 5 minutes just to prove the fact that your body doesn't control you, you control it. Maybe that would be similar to something here. Anyway, I just thought it's similar to what's being discussed there, so I figured I'd mention it, and you can match them up how you see fit. Now says the Rambam like this, that it's for this reason the mitzvahs were given. I think we can finish this paragraph. Yeah. So he says like this. And this, the Torah, with its perfect laws and instructions, is what brings us to this perfection, as the one who knows it best testifies. Torah, God's Torah is perfect. It restores the soul, like it brings a person to good character. The laws of God are trustworthy. They bring wisdom to the wise. This Torah does not mention anything about denying the body or any word of the body being inherently bad. He's contrasting those, obviously, to other religions in which a person's born in sin, where the body is physically bad, and you're only, allowed to engage your body because you have no choice. Torah doesn't mention anything of the body being bad. Rather, by nature, a person's supposed to go down the middle path. Eat what he's supposed to appropriately. And he drinks that which he's supposed to drink appropriately. And he will engage in intimacy with that which is permissible to engage in intimacy, husband and wife, in the proper manner and in the proper amount. And live amongst society upright and faithfully. Not to live out in the wilderness, isolated in the mountains or in the deserts. It doesn't tell us anywhere in the Torah that there's somehow a virtue in wearing clothing that are uncomfortable. And nowhere is there any virtue given to painting the body. And moreover, not only is it not mentioned anywhere in the Torah, but actually, but actually by tradition, in our oral Torah, the Torah actually forewarns us against painting the body. Not only does the Torah not mention anything virtuous about painting the body or denying the body, it actually warns us against doing so. Amar ben Nazir, the Torah says with respect to the Nazir. The Nazir is someone who chooses for a certain period of time to live a life of asceticism, essentially. And the verse concludes that when his time for being a Nazir stops, he's got to go bring an offering to the temple. And the verse says, and he has to bring an offering to atone for the sin that he's done to himself. And our sages said, who did he sin against? He legally took upon himself a vow to live a life of asceticism for an extended period of time. So who did he sin against? Explaining our sages, because part of the Nazir's requirement in his life, in his vow to live a life of asceticism, is to swear off wine for that period of time. And for that reason, he's got to bring a sin offering for having sworn off wine. And therefore, is it not therefore obvious If someone who swore off wine only for a short period of time requires atoning, one who denies himself completely, how much more so he has to bring atonement. And the words of our prophets and the scholars of our Torah, we see that they always look for the mean, for the center, for the middle ground, for the golden middle path, and to maintain the health of their bodies and their character, based on that which Torah obligates upon. And God responded through the prophet Jeremiah, where they were told to fast once a year, and they asked Yirmiyah if they should keep on doing this forever. I'm sorry, is it Jeremiah or Zechariah? I'm sorry, Zechariah. Here, shall we keep the fast of the 5th month, which is the fast of the 5th month is Nisan Iyar Sivan Tammuz Av, fast the 9th of Av. You guys have fasted for 70 years now, after the first temple destroyed. For 70 years now, you've been fasting on the 9th of Av, on the 5th month. Did you fast on my behalf? When you eat and drink, it's all for you. In other words, the fasting is of no use to Hashem, as it were. And afterwards, he instructed them, don't worry about the fastings. That's not going to get you closer to Hashem. You guys fasted for 70 years over the destruction of the first temple until the second temple was rebuilt. After the second temple is rebuilt, after the second temple was destroyed, they reinstated the fast of the first temple. But here it's talking about between the first and second temple. So they fasted for 70 years between the first and second temple, the mourning destruction of the first temple. And now they're asking, should we keep on doing this? And Zechariah tells them, you think that's going to help you get closer to Hashem? He tells them, no. Behaving properly is going to get you there. And he tells them like this, this is what God, Lord of Hosts, says. Lamar telling you, mishpat emes shaftu. Truthful judgments you shall judge. And kindness and mercy you shall conduct yourself man with a fellow. That's the way you're going to get closer to Hashem, not through fasting. And later on he says, so says the Lord of Hosts. The fast of the 4th month, which is Tammuz, the fast of the 5th month, which is Av, and this fast of the 7th month, which is in Tishrei, and the fast of the 10th of Tevet, shall be transformed one day into times of joy and of celebration and into good holidays. In other words, the objective is not to maintain these fasts. We had to have these fasts because we were mourning the temple, and we need to invoke teshuvah, or whatever the objectives of the fasts were, but they're only temporary. In the same way, the healing mentioned before that these pious ones would do, they would go to the other extreme of asceticism, not for its own sake, but only to heal their inner character, so that they actually get to the middle. So likewise, these fasts were a temporary measure to get whatever objective we need to get to. But the ultimate, says the verse, is that these days shall be transformed into joy, because that's what God truly wants, is the joy, which includes joy of the body being happy and healthy. And then it concludes, the verse reads, and truth and peace is beloved by God. So explains the Rambam, what are these two things? Truth and peace beloved by God, which follows this notion of rather than fast, there should be joy. So explains the Rambam. You should know, truth, when the verse says truth, this is referring to the virtues of intelligence. We mentioned back in chapter 2 that there are 2 parts of the soul that a person has free choice in them. One is the part of the soul that's responsible for character, and the second is the part of the soul that's responsible for intelligence. This book is dedicated to refining character, and on top of that, the Rambam enjoins us to build healthy intellectual relationship with God. So when the verse says truth, this refers to that higher level of intellectual pursuits of God. Because truth and ideas don't change, at least ideas about the truth, about God. Which Pirkay Avot is explained in chapter 2. But when it says peace, is the virtue of character that we're describing in this chapter, which brings peace in the world if everybody is of good moral character. In other words, the Rambam is saying like this, that Zechariah is telling the people fasting, that's not where it's at. We have to have fasts, and we're going to need to have fasts, fine, but it's not where it's all about. We actually hope these fast days turn into joy. And what are we going to get out of that? Peace and truth. Peace, good moral character. Truth, pursuit of the knowledge of the divine. Now says the Rambam, to get back to the point. Those amongst our people who try to compare our religion to other religions, and that's who I'm really talking to. People of other faiths, I'm not talking to those people, but people in our faith who try to make our faith similar to other faiths, and they say that, oh, we are pushing asceticism because we're trying to make you better. When in essence, they're picking up from cultures around them, other religions, who do actually put an emphasis on denying the body, and they're trying to transpose that onto Judaism, and they're claiming that this is going to give you a better moral character. And they're saying that they want to push you on the other direction, as we explained before, the mistake of thinking that there's virtue in going to one extreme. This is a mistake, as I shall explain. Now, God willing, next week we'll see how he's going to explain this, where the Rambam is going to demonstrate that mitzvahs themselves, the commandments themselves, are built in balance, where we have mitzvahs that we're told to control ourselves, and we have mitzvahs where we're told to engage. There's balance between asceticism and engaged living. And the Rambam is going to demonstrate how mitzvahs themselves, the commandments themselves, are built to give the person the capacity to find that ultimate middle ground.